is part 2 of the lecture for this week. It won't be as long as the other one. If you clicked on this one first, be sure to go back and watch the other one. You're going to want the foundations of what we're talking about now. This is just going to be reviewing theories and methodologies for studying family communication. And so if you don't do that, watch the first one. This one might make sense. If you've had research, it might not make sense. So just throwing that out there. All right, let's do this. Let's share the screen. Back to our crazy screen sharing. If you didn't watch the other one yet, you'll know that I had my husband texting me in the other one. It was kind of funny. Okay. So, all right. Hopefully that will go away. I wish I could make this a little bit smaller. Beep. Okay. I'm going to try to put over here. Okay. This is social construction theory. Social construction theory is a very postmodern, if you know what that means, approach to seeing the world. Social construction basically believes that there's no such thing as like a big T truth in the world, that everything is just meaning and our realities are kind of our own. It's where relativity came from, not like in physics, but I mean like social relativity is where it came from, is social construction theory. So I feel like I need to quote someone I never thought I would quote, but I will quote now, and that's Richard Dawkins, who is, he studies sciences. Anyway, he's a biologist, but he said, let's not be so open-minded that our brains fall out. I love that so much. He and I don't align on a lot of things that he writes about at all, but I've always loved that quote. Let's not be so open-minded that our brains fall out. And I feel like social construction theory actually is really cool and helps contextualize a lot of phenomenon that happen in our life. But if we take it too far, it's like our brains are falling out. So just be mindful of that. I'm obviously going to be moving the little camera around. Like, I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and watch this one because I'm not sure exactly how it records me, or if it's just me seeing me. That's so weird. I'm obsessed with myself, it sounds like. Okay, so let's focus on this. So obviously, Cyrus needs birth control. And so, okay, so the focus in social construction theory is meaning making, and particularly meaning making through communication. How communication is a function to make sense of the world around us by dialoguing with the people in our lives, no matter kind of like how they came to us. This could be a coworker, this could be a brother or sister, it could be anyone. Okay, so when we use social construction and family communication, what we're looking for is how the family works together to create meaning. Like, what are they doing to make sense of how their family fits in the world? So if you watch the first one, you know that I use the example of my husband's family and my mother-in-law teaching their kids that their family is the most important thing in the world and all other things are second to it. And that even though that concept and that culture has been challenged, it's been a closed system, and the challenge has shifted. It has shifted the family system, but not nearly as much as maybe other families systems would that were a little more open. Okay, so when someone does something, okay, sorry, I'm gonna have to give you more players. So there's me and my husband. There's my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. My husband has six sisters and one brother. And so when the other woman married into the family, so there's two of us, we noticed that there was a very specific meaning created around us joining the family versus our sisters-in-law and the men that they married joining the family. And hands down, we get talked about so much more than they do. We get criticized so much more than they do. For some reason, something about us entering the system violated the way the system works. And so when these kids were being taught as children, this is the family system and we're the most important family and your family is the most important family in the world. When someone comes in and violates that, they together create meaning. So when they talk about us, what they're talking about is like how we're messing with the family system and we need to be pushed out to the side, whether it's conscious or subconscious. That's a different theory, but it's part of this kind of social construction of what it means to be part of their family. Okay, so if you know their family, which has happened in some of my classes, and they're good people. They really genuinely are. They're just not my biggest fans. So, okay. So from an interpretive approach and rooted in symbolic interaction theory, which I love, which posits that meaning comes from symbols, right? So meanings are created and negotiated situationally by the actors. So an example, this might be a family joke, like something that happened in the family that everyone in the family thought was super funny. But if you try to tell it to someone else, you have to give them tons of context and it rarely makes sense. And okay, so that's an example of meanings are created and negotiated situationally by the actors, by all the people, by all the family members. Researchers focus on the continuous flow of conversation between people. So what we're curious about is the dialogue that occurs and how in that dialogue meaning is constructed. So I'll give you an example of what it doesn't look like, just so you have contrast. My brother works in biotech, and he was telling me that he had his annual review for the third year in a row. He's been with the company that he's working with right now for 5 years. And for the third year in a row, there's been no feedback of any kind. And he's like, how am I supposed to improve? What am I supposed to do? Like, how do I be a better employee for the company if they don't give me feedback? So that's how it doesn't look, because he can't create meaning of his place in the workplace and how the workplace perceives him because he doesn't get any feedback about it. Now, obviously, that's a workplace example, but it just reflects how important that continuous flow of conversation actually is. People who study family stories can construct meaning through family interactions. So that's usually when we're using this as a theory to study, that's what we're looking at, family stories. Dr. Allen in our department sent me an article the other day about family stories. So interesting. So if this is something that kind of gets you interested, you will be able to use it for your research paper later. So you can put that on the back burner. Here are some of the limitations of social construction theory. They're more abstract and descriptive. They're not really focused and explanatory. Does that make sense? So what we're looking for is this kind of this like, what is the meaning? What is the purpose of life? What is these kind of very philosophical big questions. They're not as predictive. They're not as explanatory. They're just kind of like, and this is how they find meaning in this scenario. And so it can be difficult to replicate. And it can be difficult to employ a research method. Ah! All right, little stinkers. Let me go back. It can be difficult to employ a research methodology that truly captures how social construction is happening. Although, now that I'm saying this to you, I wonder if AI could do that. Curious. Okay, so you can see where social construction is really, again, we're looking at small t truths with social construction because this doesn't argue that there is a big T truth. Now, whether or not you believe that is your opinion, I believe there's both. I don't know why we have to limit it. So, but I'm a kind of a big thinker. So, okay, so now we're going to talk about dialectics. I love dialectics so much. I love dialectics so much. So this is actually the theory that I used for my personal research when I did my dissertation. Like I said, I did organizational communication, which is another form of group communication, which is family communication is a form of group communication. Anyway, so this is all kind of like brother and sister stuff. They're like parallel disciplines, and so they cross over really well. So, but this is where it started. This is where dialectical communication research started. Okay, so you might have been exposed to this in a theory class before, and if you haven't, I will do my best to dumb it down, because I know I make assumptions without realizing it, because I know too much, you know what I mean? Sometimes professors know too much, and then they don't dummy it down enough, or they don't give you enough building blocks for it to make sense. And I don't want to do that to you. Okay. So, dialectics posit that family life is characterized by ongoing tensions between contradictory impulses. So these tensions are internal and individual. So I think that's something that we need to understand right from the beginning, but they're internal and individual because of the external group to which we belong. And in this case, it's family, right? To our family group. So in the case of the rubber band that I talked about in the first video, what we're basically saying is, let's say the peg was sentient, and the peg was like, should I move back 2 inches or should I move forward 2 inches? Because that's going to affect the rubber band. Okay, so that is what dialectical tension basically is. Oh my gosh. So never thought I'd do another voice, but that was fun. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're saying, like, we know we're part of a bigger system. At the same time, like, I'm trying to make sense of my world inside this bigger system. And in order for me to do that, I'm dealing with these things that kind of are challenges that pull against me at the same time. So an example of this is autonomy and connection. So this is one of the first ones that they came up with. This is the research of Baxter and Montgomery. They use Bakhtin, who is a literature guy, as kind of their foundational perspective for this. So in the book, it might say Bakhtin and Baxter, or Montgomery and Baxter, Bakhtin. I don't know how it'll present, but basically, here's what we have. We have a rubber band here, imaginary rubber band. We have an imaginary rubber band that's pulling in opposition to each other. And you know how when you pull a rubber band, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter? That's the type of tension that we're talking about that we feel internally. So on one side, we have autonomy, which is being super hyper independent. And on the other side, we have connection. And so they're arguing that these dialectical tensions that are happening at the exact same time are pulling against us, and we feel pressure to respond to these tensions. So I need alone time, or I really just want to spend time with my husband. So those are two different desires. What we're talking about here is, I really need alone time so I can stay sane, but I also really want to spend time with my husband because I haven't seen him for like 5 days. That's what we're talking about. So that's what autonomy and connection looks like. Openness and protection, same thing. Like, openness is about disclosure. How much are you willing to share? Like, obviously, I'm a super open book, and I mean that literally. I'm a super open book. I will literally talk about anything to anyone at about any time. And so that's openness. Protection is like, I don't want anyone to know what's going on in my life. I need to withhold. I want it, it's like, I don't know how, I think you know what I mean. Okay, if you have questions, message me. All right, and then we have novelty and predictability. So this might be like, let's say you're dating someone, you've been dating them for a long time, but you keep going on the same date. You keep going to the movies and dinner. And some part of you would really like to do just something different, like maybe instead of the movies, a play. Okay, so this is a tension where you like want spontaneity and yet you want stability. Okay, so that's what novelty and predictability is. There's been so much research on this. Like we could do lists and lists of these dialectical tensions that exist inside all of us, that we feel like we're grappling with all of the time. Okay, so there's a lot of ways to manage dialectical tensions. Okay, so for the first one's cyclical alteration. So remember the rubber band. It's pulling, it's pulling, it's pulling, and there's a point where you let go and it snaps. Okay, we don't want that, right? The pressure inside of us gets so intense. We need to deal with this pressure somehow. So cyclical alteration is where, like, okay, I'm going to spend time, I'm going to take time for myself for 1 hour, and then I'm going to go on a date with my husband in the next hour. That way, or I have an hour and a half. I'm going to do 45 minutes here and 45 minutes here. If you have little kids, that probably seems like a ridiculous scenario. But yeah, it might be like, I need to go to the bathroom. If you know, you know what I mean. I need to go to the bathroom and I want to play with my kids at the, not while you're in the back. That sounded so stupid. Okay, pretend like you didn't hear that one because that didn't make any sense and it was just for me. Okay, so basically it's like you're alternating between the two, so that you can kind of manage that internal tension. Segmentation is where we, oh, I'm like forgetting it now. My gosh, okay, I'm embarrassed. Oh, segmentation is where, like, in certain scenarios, we do certain things. And then selection is where we choose one or the other, and like that's just how we're gonna go. So I want our dates to be spontaneous, but they budget-wise need to be predictable. And so I'm just gonna go with predictability so I can stay in the budget, stuff like that. That's selection. Integration is like, how are we doing this? Like, how do we internalize this? Do we neutralize it? Are we gonna reframe it? Can we just disqualify it? Like, is it just that my personality is super open and so protection is just not going to be a thing for me? So then protection would just be disqualified. That's kind of what we mean when we're looking at integration, right? I think those other ones make sense. I hope. Again, you can message me if they don't make sense. Okay, developmental theory. And this, I mentioned this earlier in the lecture or the first lecture, and that is that families develop. There are developmental stages, just like a person has developmental stages. So the goal is to explain the family that changes the ways family change. Once again, the goal of developmental theory is to explain the ways that families change over time. So the process of family development is goal directed. Like, what's our objective here? So there's a stage of family life that the objective is to build your family. You're having babies, you're bringing kids into the world, or you're adopting, you are fostering, you are doing all kinds of things to build your family and to connect. That's one stage. The next stage might be like, okay, we're done with that stage. We're kind of at our limits. Now we're going to focus on rearing our children. That's the next stage, right? The goal is to rear them. So you can kind of see like each stage kind of has a goal that's associated with it. Like in the other lecture, I talked about empty nesters. And part of what makes that particular stage so challenging is that the goals are not driven by the children. Okay, so the goals looks different. So then it's a different type of stage, right? We would need to set a goal for life to make sense. That's developmental theory. Okay, so just to finish off the slideshow, necessary tasks and conditions must be met during one stage before the family can move to the next stage. So we're not building our family and focusing on rearing our children. I mean, you are, but you're not. Okay, while you're building your family, you're in the building your family stage. And then when you're done having children, adopting, fostering, whatever, then you move on to the next stage. So that's something particularly interesting about developmental theory, is that the theory stages don't overlap. Okay, as individual family members develop, the whole family develops and changes. And that family development is a forward linear process. I actually read the coolest thing in a philosophy book the other day, and it was this: time is change. Time is change. I just love that. Think about it for a while. But that's basically what they're saying with family development is. Like when there is change, time passes, it is a process, you're moving, and that movement is a forward movement. So hopefully it's a forward movement. You know what, even if it doesn't feel like a forward movement, it's a forward movement. So that's development theory. Okay, all right. There's also a revised development theory, which is more what is in our book. Okay, so the revised development theory contains 3 propositions, and that is previous stages influence present stages. Okay, so they're connected. It's not like I'm building a family and then I'm rearing my children, right? I can't rear my children if there are no children to rear. So we have to have one stage and then the next stage, and they're interconnected because I am still rearing my older children while I'm having younger children, right? So they're connected. Families develop in consistent patterns over time. I think that's something that's really, really fascinating. And then the norms from other social institutions influence the timing of events and stages in families. Okay, my battery's about to die, so I'm gonna have to speed it up here. The propositions are that the events are transition points between stages, and the order of stages in a family's life career is not invariant or irreversible, right? You can go back. So I might like rear my children, and then I'm like, I'm gonna rear more children. I've had friends who have done this, and then they foster and then adopt, and then they kind of rear another family like that. That's what they decide to do. Okay, so methods of inquiry, I'm gonna fly through these. You're grateful my battery's about to die. We have quantitative, that's the numbers. Qualitative, that's the stories. Triangulation, which is how we basically, when we put all the data together, does it work, right? Am I just making something up as a researcher, or when I compare and contrast and align, does it work? Are the findings lining up, and are they verifiable between each other, among each other? And then we have survey research. Triangulation actually is a qualitative subset anyway. So survey research is also a quantitative subset. So we can ask samples, we can get respondents. Okay. So here's the second thing. We have experiments, in-depth interviews. That's what I do. Textual analysis, also what I do. And then genograms, here we are. Okay, so you guys know what that other stuff is. If you don't, you can read about it, but I'm gonna tell you about the genograms. Genograms are visual depictions of family communication patterns and relationships across at least 3 generations. Okay, 3 generations. Okay, and so what you're going to be doing, you're in your textbook, it has some of the symbols for the genogram, and you're looking for communication patterns and relationships. Now, there are some genograms that have you do like health, or disease or mental health, and those are really, really helpful in a family system, especially where there is like genetic disease where you can kind of track the flow. And so you have health history, but for this class, we don't need to worry about it. For this class, all we're concerned with is like, who's in the family, what are their relationships to each other, and how do they communicate with one another, okay? I am gonna actually post on Teams symbols, genogram symbols. You can use GenoPro. You can actually use it for free. I believe they do it for academics for free. So people can try the software, but you can also just draw a picture. You can just use the symbols online and do it on a poster board. I don't care how you do it, but you are going to have to explain it, and you are going to have to write a paper about it. So it needs to be thorough. You need at least 3 generations. Yes, you are including aunts and uncles and all the, I mean, if you're from a big Mormon family, you're including all the fireworks, which is why some people might want to use software or a poster board. Some people have small families. Some people are on their own. And in that case, then we want to use a fictional family. That way we can get a sense of how the process works. So, all right, my friends, we did it. We made it through the lecture and we survived. So hopefully you're good. I'm going to post the lecture from last week that didn't get posted. That was like insane, crazy file approach software I'm never using again. And then, yeah, we should be good. Please let me know if you have any questions, especially about your assignments, and have a good one. Okay, bye. Maybe, okay, bye again. Bye.